In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek, life often proceeded at a comfortable pace. Homes adorned with well-tended lawns and colorful flower beds reflected the pride of their owners. Among them was Sheriff Jamal Thompson, a respected figure not just for his law enforcement career but also for his role as a community leader. For years, Jamal had dedicated himself to serving the people of Willow Creek, dispelling crime and fostering a sense of unity among the residents. However, beneath the surface of this idyllic suburban life, tensions simmered, fueled by an overzealous homeowners association, HOA, and one particularly contentious member, Allison Graves. Allison was a self-appointed enforcer of the HOA rules and regulations. With her clipboard in hand and a penchant for scrutinizing even the smallest infractions, she took pride in her role. Yet, over time, her passion turned into a bitter obsession, an obsession that often manifested in discriminatory behavior towards residents who didn't fit her narrow definition of an ideal neighbor. Under the guise of wanting to uphold the community standards, Allison frequently targeted families of color and those who didn't conform to her worldview, igniting brewing resentments among the residents. One breezy afternoon, a whisper of discontent filled the air as residents gathered for the monthly HOA meeting. Tensions reached a boiling point when Allison announced her newest initiative, an unscrupulous team of HOA police to formally enforce compliance with neighborhood rules. The concept itself raised eyebrows, but the manner in which Allison announced it, dripping with racial undertones, caught the attendees off guard. It was evident that her vision for the neighborhood was rooted in control and conformity rather than community and understanding. As the meeting drew to a close, whispers of dissent echoed across the room. People were unsettled by the prospect of self-appointed HOA enforcers. They feared that the creation of this HOA police would further alienate residents and degrade the communal atmosphere. Nevertheless, Allison brushed off the concerns, her mind set on her crusade against perceived infractions. Days turned into weeks, and the HOA police initiative manifested into an actual patrol team, comprised largely of like-minded HOA members who donned unofficial uniforms and badges, eager to assert their authority. It wasn't long before they began surveying the neighborhood, looking for any potential violations. Now, the peaceful suburb was overshadowed by the prospect of unwarranted scrutiny, particularly deterred by the notion that someone as visible and influential as Sheriff Jamal might be put under their microscope. The stage was set for an inevitable confrontation that would shake the foundations of their community. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Sheriff Jamal Thompson returned home after completing his shift. His spirits were high as he envisioned spending the rest of the day relaxing with his family, unwinding from the week's stresses. But as he turned onto his street, his upbeat mood began to sour. There, at the end of the cul-de-sac, was a group of self-anointed HOA vigilantes, adorned in makeshift uniforms and brandishing clipboards. Leading the pack was none other than Allison Graves herself, her brows furrowed in concentration as she surveyed Jamal's property. As he approached his driveway, the mood shifted. Jamal could see the awkward glances exchanged among the HOA team and the nervous excitement as they gathered their courage. It wasn't hard to understand what they were doing there. The moment he parked his car and stepped out, they approached him in an almost military formation, all stern expressions and resolute attitudes. Jamal recognized the dynamic immediately, a power play fueled by racism and ignorance. "Sheriff Thompson," Allison spoke up, her voice dripping with condescension. "We're here to discuss some concerns regarding your property. I believe there are several code violations." Her smirk failed to hide the underlying bitterness in her tone. Jamal raised an eyebrow, taken aback by her audacity. He wasn't just a resident, he was the sheriff. "Concerns," he replied, maintaining his calm demeanor, though inside he felt the heat of frustration building. "I haven't received any notice about any violations. What exactly are you implying?" Allison glanced at her fellow HOA enforcers, who otherwise seemed uncertain and apprehensive about confronting someone with Jamal's authority. But emboldened by their leader's resolve, one of the team members pointed toward Jamal's fence, claiming it had been painted an unacceptable color. In an instant, a realization struck Jamal. This entire spectacle was more than just about a fence. It was about exerting authority over him simply because of his identity. The HOA had cobbled together this rogue force to serve their own interests, an interest rooted in bias. And he was the target. "What you're doing here is illegal," Jamal said firmly, his voice steady. He held Allison's gaze. "You have no authority to enforce anything on my property without proper notice or due process. This is my home." They were not prepared for the wrath Jamal could summon. The tension in the air grew thick as the small group exchanged nervous glances. Realizing they may have bitten off more than they could chew, Allison maintained a steely facade but faltered for a moment, her bravado waning. She had envisioned an easy confrontation, but facing off against an authoritative figure who would not cower proved more challenging than she had anticipated. "Maybe we misunderstood," one of the other members dared to mumble. Jamal's eyes narrowed. "Understand this, you need to back down. I won't allow you to undermine my role in this community or this neighborhood. If you think you can intimidate me, think again." As those words left his mouth, he felt a surge of empowerment. It was not just about the injustice of the moment, it was about standing up against people who exploited their positions to sow division instead of unity. This confrontation would be the catalyst for something greater, the beginning of a reckoning that neither Jamal nor Allison could have anticipated. In the days following that explosive encounter, whispers circulated throughout Willow Creek. Residents who had witnessed the HOA team's audacious confrontation with Sheriff Jamal felt deep unease. Many held respect for the sheriff and were proud that he served their community, and his treatment at the hands of the self-styled HOA police sparked a fire in the hearts of neighbors who had stayed silent too long. Social media rapidly became a battleground for discussion. Many residents began sharing their thoughts, posting messages of support for Jamal and condemning the HOA for their behavior. Posts featured reports of previous incidents where the HOA's aggressive tactics had alienated families, especially families of color. The truth had been revealed. This was not the first instance of Allison's racially charged enforcement of decorum, it was simply one too many. Friends and neighbors exchanged ideas, leading to the formation of a grassroots coalition aimed at countering the HOA's overreach. They called themselves the Voices of Willow Creek, and vowed to ensure that their neighborhood remained a place of inclusion, diversity, and mutual respect. Meetings were held at the community center, local parks, and even in backyards, and the sentiments echoed loudly. Enough was enough. They would no longer tolerate division masked as rule enforcement. Emboldened by the growing movement, the coalition rallied their fellow residents for a public meeting. Excitement infused the air as attendees from all walks of life signed petitions and expressed their stories. Lively discussions sparked debates about the HOA's conduct, ultimately resulting in consensus. Action had to be taken to rein in their authority. As the petition circulated, allies emerged from unexpected quarters. Even some members of the HOA began to question Allison's leadership, growing uncomfortable with their tactics. Discontent simmered, leading to rising tensions among HOA members caught between loyalty and conscience. In the background, Jamal stood as a trusted figure, offering wise counsel to the growing coalition. His lived experience lent credibility to their cause, igniting hope in the hearts of those who once felt silenced. The sheriff's voice resonated, encouraging everyone to advocate for change, not in retaliation but through peaceful pushback. As the group mobilized, lines began to form, connections were made, and bridges built among neighbors who had previously operated within their corners of the community unaware of shared sentiments. This blossoming friendship nurtured a sense of belonging, revitalizing bonds that reminded everyone that their stories were intertwined. The next HOA meeting loomed, where the coalition planned to present their petition, and the air buzzed with anticipation. For many, this was not just about opposing Allison Graves. It was a clarion call for collective action to reclaim the narrative of their community. Sheriff Jamal stood as a formidable ally at the forefront, ready to help his neighbors take back their voice. The day of the meeting arrived, dragging a heavy weight of anticipation mixed with anxiety. The Willow Creek Community Center, a small yet beloved gathering place, was filled with residents. The tension could be cut with a knife. News had spread throughout the neighborhood. The showdown between the coalition of residents and the HOA was about to unfold. Sheriff Jamal stood at the helm as a custodian of hopes and dreams, and many residents took heart in knowing he would guide them through this challenge. As the HOA gathered, Allison entered the meeting room with an air of defiance, clutching her clipboard as if it were a shield. Behind her, a few loyal HOA members shuffled in, casting sidelong glances at the swelling crowd. They seemed unsure about how to proceed with the voices of dissent gathering strength across the room. The room filled with murmurs, residents dividing between supporters and those loyal to the HOA. Sheriff Jamal took a moment to assess the scene, a familiar arena now filled with heightened stakes. He stepped forward and motioned for quiet. When he began to speak, his voice carried a weight of authority tempered by compassion. "Thank you all for being here today. It is my honor to serve as your sheriff, but my role extends beyond law enforcement to fostering community bonds. Today, we are here to address the grievances surrounding the Homeowners Association, particularly the tactics of intimidation that some have experienced." With hopes pinned on the sheriff's words, Jamal laid out the events that led to this momentous gathering, emphasizing the need for mutual respect and open dialogue. As he spoke, the crowd nodded in agreement, rallying around each other. It was more than just a meeting. It was a statement of collective resistance against the divisive practices pulled from the shadows of prejudice that had lingered in their neighborhood. As Jamal's message resonated, a chorus of voices arose from the crowd, sharing personal experiences with the HOA and their aggressive actions. A mother recounted the time she received a notice over a soccer net left in her yard for a day too long. Another resident shared how their attempts to host community gatherings were met with scornful rebukes from HOA members. One after another, they found strength in solidarity, a resounding confirmation that they were not alone. And then, it was time for the coalition to present their petition. The mood shifted as they unfurled the well-prepared document, detailing the need for reform within the HOA structure. They sought to implement rules that ensured fairness, accountability, and representation, emphasizing that the HOA could only exist in service to all the residents, not just a select few. Sheriff Jamal endorsed their efforts, voicing his support and echoing the call for a more inclusive neighborhood. As the petition was read aloud, the energy in the room surged. They received applause from their supporters, an affirmation of their cause. But Allison stood firm, crossing her arms defiantly as she faced the onslaught of dissent. "We operate under the rules established for a reason," she snapped. "If you want to make changes, you need to follow proper channels, not stir up division." But her words fell flat against the rising tide of dissent. Residents spoke out against her comments, recounting examples of how her behavior had already alienated people. The community began to rally, demanding equal treatment and respect. It was clear, something had shifted. Willow Creek was no longer just Allison's domain, it belonged to the people. Faced with overwhelming pushback, Allison's veneer of control began to crack. The meeting climaxed in a wave of palpable unity, a colorful display of residents raising their voices, passionately advocating for their shared vision of a community without fear. The collective strength of shared stories stood as both testimony and rebuke to the oppressive tactics of a few. The meeting ended without a clear resolution, but as residents began to disperse, the mood was electric. They left united, transformed by the experience. Sheriff Jamal felt an immense sense of pride. A community was awakening, and he had played a pivotal role in the static discharge of courage that would spark enduring change. But the fight was not over yet, it was merely the beginning. The aftermath of the fateful HOA meeting rippled through Willow Creek, and the impact of community mobilization began to take shape. The unyielding efforts of the coalition, now firmly named the Voices of Willow Creek, had thrust issues of inequality and injustice front and center. Residents voiced their demands for change through various means. Petitions, community forums, and conversations taking place in every public space, from backyards to coffee shop. The coalition became a new focal point for residents wanting to see tangible change. As the discussions unfolded, it became increasingly clear that the issues at hand extended beyond the HOA. The monopoly on power and authority that Allison had exerted fed into a larger paradigm of racial and class inequity, a point that residents had largely ignored or downplayed until now. As word spread, they found allies in unexpected places, including those who had once supported Allison's vision for the neighborhood. Residents who had kept silent grew emboldened, understanding that true community meant collaboration, acceptance, and respect for diversity. They sought a transformation within the HOA to turn it into a functioning body that would genuinely serve every resident. In the weeks that followed, as winter transitioned into spring, the coalition organized outreach events designed to promote dialogue around inclusivity and community welfare. Discussions centered on shared values allowed connections to develop, creating channels that had previously been stifled. The groundwork they laid became a foundation for future nurturing and support. Meanwhile, Sheriff Jamal continued his support for the coalition, acting as a mediator and supporter. He was often seen alongside residents as they marched to City Hall to present their revised proposals for the HOA to local leaders, demanding not only accountability but representation that reflected the community as a whole. This collaborative effort toward transparency cultivated a shift toward a neighborhood united and motivated to effect real change. On a parallel note, the HOA faced mounting challenges. The withdrawal of support from several its aligned members sent tremors through its command structure, causing dissent to spread. Some HOA board members stepped down or openly criticized the association's practices, fearing backlash against themselves and their values. Faced with community suspicion and resistance, Allison found herself increasingly isolated within her bubble of authority. One evening, an emergency meeting of the HOA was convened, feeling an urgent need to address the growing discontent. The air was thick with anxiety as board members openly questioned the sustainability of Allison's leadership. In her typical fashion, she attempted to suppress dissenting voices, insisting they simply needed to reaffirm their rules, but now it would not suffice amidst the storm building outside. A balancing act ensued as voices rose in the meeting, pushing back against Allison's authoritarian style. It became apparent that the community was watching intently, and her attempts to regain control crumbled rather than rejuvenated her rule. The tide had turned as more residents committed to seeing her pushed out of a position that she had held for too long. In the swirling chaos of transitional governance, the momentum shifted in favor of grassroots efforts. Conversations between former foes and allies, predicated on mutual understanding rather than division, species of hope and healing emerged as the neighborhood grew more united. The coalition worked diligently to gain visibility and legitimacy, leveraging the momentum from their last meeting into proposals for genuine outreach and reform. They emphasized the importance of cultural sensitivity training for HOA members, ensuring that decisions made would involve diverse perspectives reflective of the people they represented. Slowly but surely, the new perspectives integrated within the HOA would help redefine its mission and purpose. As weeks turned into months, Sheriff Jamal remained an unwavering symbol of positivity and progress for the community. Time and intense interactions ultimately yielded hope for a brighter future as the coalition persevered in their fight for a real sense of belonging and ownership within the neighborhood. As the dust settled on the chaotic months that followed the confrontation between Sheriff Jamal Thompson and the HOA, Willow Creek found itself embarking on a transformative journey to healing and growth. The relentless efforts of the Voices of Willow Creek bore fruit, resulting in significant shifts within the HOA. The uprising sparked discussions that ultimately forced introspection among HOA members, leading to the resignation of Allison Graves from her position. Suddenly, a new chapter began in the neighborhood, as the HOA opened its doors to community input. What once operated as an isolated authority was now morphing into a community-driven foundation aimed at reflecting the diversity and values of every resident. With the assistance of dedicated coalition members, a new board emerged. Individuals who truly wanted the best for their neighborhood, bringing forth fresh ideas and perspectives to the table. New bylaws established democratic processes ensuring that decisions were made collectively, with representation formerly marginalized now fully included. The HOA began hosting monthly community potlucks, encouraging social connection and reminders that diversity is a strength rather than a division. Residents from various backgrounds built bridges, enhancing relationships that had been built on misunderstandings and reliance on stereotype. Another pivotal development came as the coalition members recognized the imperative need to educate others. They opened the Willow Creek Community Forum, an initiative that highlighted issues relevant to social equity, civic engagement, and communal responsibility. Residents gathered to share their experiences, celebrate their cultures, and advocate for ongoing changes. Together, they hosted workshops on navigating local governance, helping residents understand their rights, responsibilities, and roles in shaping their community, rendering fear unto conviction, igniting a passionate drive for equal participation in civic life. As the community thrived, it stood as a testament to the power of grassroots movements to challenge and transform outdated structures that perpetuate division. Sheriff Jamal remained a vital presence throughout this rejuvenation. Innocent encounters at the coffee shop or neighborhood events often became communal gatherings where he answered questions and shared wisdom rooted in years of service and leadership. As a trusted figure, he reinforced unity and collaboration, helping residents navigate lingering tensions and confront societal issues from a place of understanding and empathy. The story of the fight against discrimination transformed from one of division to celebration. Willow Creek emerged stronger, more vibrant, and deeply woven together in the fabric of collective responsibility. As the sun rose on a warm Saturday morning, families gathered for a block party, filled with laughter and kindness, each bringing dishes from their heritage to share. The day was delightful, a celebration of their community's triumph over adversity. The transformation that began after the confrontation in Jamal's front yard had rippled throughout the entire neighborhood, redefining the meaning of home, belonging, and community. Through courage, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to each other, the people of Willow Creek found not just a resolution to their troubles but a renewed sense of purpose, hope, and love for one another.